you scholars, it's Makito here, and today we're going to be looking at more of the Fuseki Revolution book. So this is generally a book that goes over how AI kind of changed our thinking, right? It's kind of changed the way we've been playing. Obviously, AI came about in 2016, and it's still being studied heavily today. So we are going to look into, if you're following along with us in the book, we're looking at theme 17. We're doing, I believe, 4 chapters. So we'll be covering the distant approach moves, so these far moves. We'll be covering the one space high approach. We'll be looking into why the hane has kind of disappeared. This hane at the head of 2 stones with the early 3/3s. And then finally, which I think is probably one of the most important ones, is why has the pincer lost popularity? I know this one specifically, theme 20, is something that I'm going to have to study over and over and over again to really get down. But let us begin with theme 17, distant approach moves. So nowadays, approaching at the marked locations here and D is the most popular ways to handle the 3/4 stones. But before AI, players would often approach with a 2 space distant move, like this one here, R6, or at B here, Q6. And so these were pretty familiar moves in the past. Nowadays, though, that's completely changed. So let's take a look at, some facts about why it has changed. First, this was very common to take the corner. So when somebody approaches you from far, you can immediately go to take the corner. If white then makes a 2 space base, you can see that black can pinch, white jumps, right? Try and make the base bigger. Black probes. It's like a forcing move to force white to connect, and then it has a thorn inside its like body, I guess. Black then expands the corner, and then white should feel like it needs a move to kind of settle this group, right? If black plays one for the corner, white looks to settle very quickly. When we look at this as an end result, I feel like black got 2 really good sides, and white just looks kind of small and undevelopable. So this doesn't feel that great for white, in my opinion. So now if we were playing as white and we did a large base extension, black still gets to pinch. We still have to inflate ourselves, right? Make our base bigger. Black then uses the same probe and then makes his corner bigger. And then because you can see there's a big opening here, a lot of the times in the past, the Joseki was to close this opening off. White can also stretch out further, right? This is talking about this 3 space extension instead of a 2 space base. And this leads to a calm settling as well, right? White gets to settle once again. The author of the book says he still has to figure out the real solid reason why AI doesn't play these moves, but he has his conjunctures, right? He has his ideas why, and we're going to talk about them right now, right? If we look at the first 2 variations, white settles in black's influence, but black builds on both sides with sente. So black builds on both sides, even though white settles. As the white player, you may feel dissatisfied with this. The second reason that comes to mind is that the R6 approach doesn't affect the 3/4 stone as much. Black and Tanuki. So we can look at a lot more options where black doesn't need to play R4. But I also want to point out, maybe I missed it in the reading or didn't emphasize it, but the idea is that black gets sente, right? Yeah, with sente. This idea that black gets the next move after white has to play a move to settle. This always feels bad, right? If you're giving away sente. And in both variations, you can see that black gains sente after white has to make a settling move. So, in fact, I really think that these situations of, pinching down on your opponents gives you quite an advantage here in this particular case. So if white plays this far away, we first looked at A for the corner. Let's look at a tanuki next. If black tanukis, white can then attach. Black then uses an inside hane. So even though white has two moves against the one, you're going to see black is going to be okay, right? Black uses this inside hane, which induces the crosscut. And then once black Ataris and Ataris, black then plays 9. So black Ataris in the crosscut. This is something I usually don't advise because in most cases both sides are important. But if you want to sacrifice one side to get a better result on the other, then this Ataring in the crosscut works. So we Atari in the crosscut, Atari in the crosscut. White gets stronger in both instances. But then black has neutralized the stone, right? Black, you made a broken knight's move shape. And so this is really good for black, right? Romeo and Juliet got split apart. And so if black Tanuki's won, even if white gets a second move, black can make great shape. By sacrificing Q3, black makes a strong group. If black wants to, he can even ignore 2 and Tanuki at A. So the idea is that when white attached here, black can still ignore this and then just Tanuki at A to get 2 stones against the 1 here. The large knight approach gives many options to black, so we can continue to look at some more options. So you can see we looked at A, we looked at the Tanuki at B, so let's look at the pincer with C. If black pincers and white attaches, we use pretty much the same tactic. We incite a crosscut that we're just okay with black sacrificing one side to get the advantage on the other. Now this is the move that I would find hard to find. I like it because normally I try not to make moves that get split easy, but because there's a chop and hold, right? This black thorn inside white side. Once white pushes through, you can then hane, and white is starting to look like it's missing liberties. So white nips that in the bud by taking the stone out of the way, and then black connects. Similar to the last variation now, black used a pincer first. This is a nice Fuseki and another option for black. So you can see black's influence towards its developable side looks really nice for black. So that's one other option for black. And then finally, we can look at the shoulder hit. It's kind of my least favorite, but it was very common, I remember, with, I really want to say the Kobayashi, where black had 2 stones here. But anyway, you can shoulder hit. And if white comes into the corner, you push, and then you make a extension to your wall, right? Not my favorite, but it is an option. Black can also shoulder hit. This is tested with AI and is considered satisfactory for black. Next, we will look at the high 2-space approach, but the story is the same. It doesn't put enough pressure on black, giving black the freedom to Tanuki or a multitude of options to play with. So we saw that if white approaches far away, black has many options and can handle pretty much everything. So this feels unsatisfactory or disadvantageous for white to play this far away. So we can also look at this one. Same thing, white is far from black 3-4 stone. So an attachment at A is not so bad, right? This idea that even if we Tanuki, it's really not that bad when white attaches. First, we look at the most common response, something like this. If black makes a move like this and white makes a base like this can already be considered a good exchange for black because black gets the next move. So the idea is this is pretty nice for black already. Black can also pincer, and if white shoulder hits, black then targets the weakness, turns, makes a knight's move to make a base, white makes shape, and then black then makes shape on both sides. So black can also pincer for 1. White can settle, but black builds on both sides. White does not get an upper hand using the far approaches, so it's better to come closer to the 3/4s. As we can see, that black kind of handled everything pretty well and had lots of options to do it, whereas white has little options, right, if black is making all the choices. And so usually, most of the time, we approach here on the 3/4s, and that this large approach, this long distant approach, as it was called, has kind of gone extinct. All right, so we're going to move on. Let me just see this. Yeah, we're going to move on to what I think is a favorite, right? This is a very, very, very common thing, right? This one space high approach. The one space high approach is not as popular as the low approach, according to AI in pro games at the start of this writing. Even in my own experience, I like the high approach because I thought it was simpler. But my teacher, such as Raven, would ask me why not go low, right? Why not play the low approach instead of the high one? Going high gives your opponent extra territory. Um, and just days before I created, I got this lecture from the book. My own student asked me the same thing a few days ago. Why is the low better than the high? The author states that going high, this high approach, is fine, but he tries to find reasons why it has lost popularity. And I think he does a good job finding those reasons. So when white attaches, black then hanes, and white pulls back, the AI has a strong preference for corner territory, and playing high gives white easy territory. This is the first reason he thinks it's become less popular. So first we can look at this move. If white pushes to take the corner fully, right, it's like pushes to make a base, and black just extends regularly. This is the older style Fuseki. White then check extends, pincering this group. Black should make a what do you call it, defensive move to get rid of some of the weaknesses inside here. And then white then plays a third move to kind of take the corner. If AI loves developing the corners overall, this is considered unplayable for black. Black gains territory, or sorry, white gains great development on the bottom and solid territory on the top. This is considered favorable for white. If we Tanuki now, if we just leave these stones as is, white then can answer. Black then plays this move. White finishes the corner, and then black plays this move. And now you can see this isn't a checking extension anymore. It's not as aggressive against black. So that was the purpose of playing this move first before coming back to play this. But when white plays this, which forces black into an uncomfortable position to make a base, white then gets the next move in sente. And so once again, we can see two corners in a sente move. Although black feels more active with one here, and stops the checking extension. When white plays two, white gains two corners, sente, and there's Zaji at A. So there's still a weakness here at A. This was seen as favorable for white. So let's take a look at the solid connection that honestly all of us know and love, right? Most of us I see play this solid connection all the time. So let's examine it through a pro's eyes, right? This idea that white then makes the corner solid and then black extends. Well, now it still is vulnerable to checking extensions. And if black doesn't want to play something like this, we saw in the previous diagrams, kind of trying to solidify a very small area like this feels bad. Trying to settle small feels bad. So black plays something like this, which helps white get stronger for this corner. And then black goes out further. So now you can see black can kind of breathe, right? Black's not very claustrophobic on the side of the board. It can breathe out into the center. But at the cost of that is white gets Sente. So black gains some center influence, and this is considered playable. White gets 2 corners and Sente once again, and so this feels like white got the better deal. If you don't mind giving up some territory to keep things simple, you can play this way. This is what I told my student as well before I even read this book. White gains more territory, but it's very simple to understand or use for black. Yes. Yeah, yeah. This is very simple to use for black. But you are giving away territory. Um, Before I read this, like I said, even some of my own personal teachers who's decided to help me out has told me like playing high does give away points quickly to your opponent, and you can see how that can happen, right? And so just know that this is considered still playable, and the professional still believes that you can play this if that's what makes you is like comfortable for you. This D15 one stone high approach. I think that covers everything, unless I missed something. Oh yes, okay. So now we need to look at the avalanche. So the idea is that we're starting the avalanche. So as black, instead of playing this very normal move, what if we want to start the avalanche? Well, if white pushes and black plays this, instead of playing one of these moves, this or this or this, to make the avalanche bigger, white actually plays this move, and this is where things have changed, right? This is kind of the new hotness. So if black tries to kind of do something similar, we can see black builds a nice big wall, but black doesn't want to get hit on the head of 3 stones. Black doesn't want to get hit on the head here, right? Because white would get too many points. And so black has to keep responding. And once we reach this point where white's extremely comfortable, white then tanukis, and this wall looks silly. Black could try to go for the avalanche, but this is seen as a mistake nowadays. White 4 is very effective in undercutting black, so this 4 stone is already undercutting this wall already. And by the end of 9, right, move 9, white has secured territory and has Sente. So using 10 takes a big point, and black's wall later could become an attack target more than thickness. This is considered very favorable for white. So if anybody tries to start the avalanche on you, don't play the normal stuff, right? The stuff that we learned in the 70s and 80s. Try out this new move. This is really effective against black. If black came down, this isn't covered in the book, but if black came down, you could hit him on the head, right? And so that's very easy to see. And so that's why black has to keep preventing white not to hit him on the head, and then white gets to neutralize the wall. This is fantastic for white. So that covers the one space high approach. These are going quicker than I thought. Maybe I'm missing stuff, but I don't think so. The idea is that, well, we already went over it, but yeah, favorably, this is the more favorable move because this one gives the AI what the AI wants, right? This idea of making 2 corners very quickly and getting Sente. That's fantastic for AI, so they really like that. So let us move on to the next one. So now we've reached chapter 3. If you're following along in the book, that's where we are now. We're at the revolutionary new Joseki, invented by the AI chapter. In this chapter, we will focus on new Joseki and explore the changes to old Joseki. The whole board must be considered when choosing Joseki. Please keep that in mind. This is very much stressed, right? The idea is it's good to learn the new Joseki, but you also need to learn when to apply it, right? You need to think about the whole board before you just go choose in one Joseki or the other. Very important advice. So it looks like we're talking about the early 3-3 and why this early hane has gone out of fashion, right? So this is theme 19. Why did the hane at the head of the two stones opening disappear? Nowadays, you don't see AI or pros use this hane here. The two accepted answers these days are at A or B. Let's first look at the past when we used to play 4 before AI came to the scene. Now, mind you, I said that they don't use this hane, but they do on a very specific Fuseki line, which you all may know as the double hane. We'll talk about that at the end. But first, let's go back to the past and see what they're trying to teach us now. So, excuse me. So, in the past, we would play this exchange, and white would play up, and we would play here, and white would play here. And then in the past, we would just play A. This was like the golden standard. This was the only like move you could do back then that was in the books and like recommended. This idea that once we play A, we'll have a nice corner, and then white will finish off its thickness. And so before AI, would usually not do a 3-3, right? Most players would not do an early 3-3 before AI. And the idea was that because if it led to this Joseki, it was too good for white. White's thickness was really strong. Let's read some script. This idea of giving white such thickness was out of the question. If white had A and B, so if white had both A and B, then you could do this 3-3 and over-concentrate white. But with the early 3-3, there are no stones on the starting star points, these star points. If things stayed the same, this would be good for white. The AI changed our perspectives on the move at 6. So AI considered this as a really bad move. And instead, black plays here. And so white can't allow black to hit the head of these 3 stones. So if white extends, well, then black can push out. Black can tanuki. Black doesn't need to turn at A, B, or C, and so black can live with 1. And neutralize the wall with 3, right? This idea that this is sente for black. And so now you get to live in the corner and you get sente to neutralize this wall. This is really good for black. If white tanuki's at D, so this idea that if white doesn't play anything locally in tanukis, well, now black can play here, which gets very close and it's very strong for black. It's a checking extension. If white doesn't see the danger and then ignores it with a tanuki, well, then black then gets to peep here. And this field looks really nice for black. White looks like less of a thickness and more of a stick to be attacked. If white plays 1, black gets to make an ideal attacking move while making territory. This is favorable for black. The mark stone is important. Let's see if we don't make the exchange. So the idea is that this is one of the most key moves, not only for life, but also making white a little silly. And so if we don't play this move, and we just tried what we did earlier without this exchange, white's going to turn here, and now black needs to live, right? Black's in a lot of trouble. So black makes these moves to live. White then makes the strong move, right? And you can see white's influence is really nice facing the developable area, and white looks extremely powerful with this wall, and black looks a little enclosed here. If black tanuki's early, white turns, and black needs to live with 3 and 5. White gains strength from this exchange, making it favorable for white. So let's go back to the beginning with the knight's move instead of the hitting the head on the hane. Hitting the head of the hane. Hitting the head with the hane, that's what it should say. But hopefully you can see why this exchange is so good, because if white has to answer, then we get life and we get what we want, right? But if we ignore this and white gets this turn, now we're the ones who's threatened and is very close to death, and so we need to strengthen ourselves. And by strengthening ourselves, we've given white lots of strength on the outside. So, very important concept. So instead of playing hit the head of the hane, right? Use the hane to hit the head of 2 stones. Nowadays, you'll see this move or this move. So let's look at this knight's one. This is the most one I've seen used. If black pushes up, white plays this. If black takes over on this side, instead of answering, this is actually bad. White usually tanukis now, but let's take a look if white answers. Black pushes, and then once again, it's that same situation, right? White doesn't want to get hit on the head, and so black is able to neutralize the wall. But comparatively, this wall is much stronger than the previous one. Compare this 3-stone wall now to the 2-stone wall before. This shifts everything 1 stone, and that makes the difference. White can tanuki now, unlike before. So in the last one, if white tanukied, black would be able to move closer and then peep, right? In this case, if the same things are allowed, move closer, and then white takes another tanuki, and black peeps at A, you can see there's a weakness here at B. So I'll read the script. Black's peep is not as severe as it once was. Before, black could peep with no problem, but if black peeps now at A, he is open at B. He's much more vulnerable. White is also more stronger, right? Is very strong, and black's attack is weaker. So it's a very different situation. If you don't like this peep at all, and you like to be solid, right, you can use the solid connection instead of the knight's move. So let's look at that and then the head of the hane one more time. So the idea is this, right? The idea is if you don't like all the weakness and peeps and stuff, you can just play very solidly. If black extends, you can hit him on the head, or if you use a knight's move, you can tanuki. So this also is an option. Both of these are better than A. Finally, what if we do play A? Well, then this is where this move comes in. So this is one that probably most of us know. It's very common, double hane joseki. The idea is that once we do this, and black ataris and takes the stone, well, now white gets to take these stones. The hane into capturing the corner is still going strong. I've heard this from 2 sources now. This is my personal experience. One was from Michael Redman's video when he was studying. I think he'd studied like 60 games from the AI, like facing people, right? He did an awesome series, but he recommended this if you want things to be simple. Also, this book by Shibano, this is also considered an even result and a simple way to play. So I've gotten this from 2 sources now, but the idea is that if you just want a corner and you're fine with blacking a Panuki, then you can play this double hane way. It does make things simple, right? Nothing's more simpler than taking a corner, but you are giving up a side, and so you have to keep that in mind. I don't use it too often, but I do sometimes, right? Makes things easy. So that should be it for this part of the early 3-3. And specifically, why did the hane at the head of 2 stones opening disappear? Technically, it's still around, but it has lost a lot of popularity, right? It's not played like it used to be before the AI. All right. We are now getting to the last part of this video, and admittedly, this is the longest because we're going to cover all pincers. But this is probably the most important part of the video, in my opinion. Why has the pincers lost popularity? The mainstream moves of today are to answer with A. So when black approaches the 3-4 stone, the main moves are A, B, and C. Um, which simplifies the low approach for both players, for both black and white. Before, white would have all these options, right, and Tanuki, of course. But nowadays, these are the main three that are used for white when they're approached. Um, in the past, the pincers D through I were considered good, right? But now they are less popular. This is due to either because of getting a bad result. So if you pincer and you get a bad result, that already feels bad. So why would you play it, right? And it leads to very complex fighting, which is Joseki that hasn't been solved yet. There's no one path to like even results. So this complex fighting is very hard, at whether it's a pro level or amateur level. The AI prefers not to pincer, and so the pros have followed suit. Right? They follow along with what the AI predicts. So let us look at the first pincer. Let's look at this one. So when black, this is kind of the key move. Whenever you're pincered, I think this is the right answer for every single pincer. So this also makes things simpler for you if you're used to getting pincered, and so you at least know the first move to try. Um, Actually, let's start with this one. I want to follow along with the book so that everything makes sense. So I think it's this one. So instead of the type pincer, let's start with this one. We'll go back to the type pincer, obviously. But first, let's look at this. So this is 2-space high pincer. Same move comes out. And looking for our white's options, if white plays A, black pushes, white jumps, and then I believe, yep, black tanukis. When white submits at 2, this feels favorable for black. So now white would normally fight at A instead. So this idea is that when black pushes down white and then makes a little bit of a wall and then gets to pincer the stone, this is actually favorable for black. So that's kind of interesting because without having bases for either group, it feels uncomfortable when I play these. But at a high level, this is better for black. So white usually would want to answer with this. Now, the old Joseki was to play this jump here, which sets up a driving Tetsuji here. So white breaks that Tetsuji, and then black pushes out. White finishes off this stone, and then black hugs this stone. This was an old Joseki. It would lead to a driving Tetsuji at 4 and 6. AI didn't like this though, and invented a new way to handle things as black. So this was two even results, or better yet, favorable for white. And so instead of black playing A, black plays B. This is a very aggressive move, and it's going to lead to a lot of complex fighting. If white hits, you counter. Then this one's fun, using all the forcing moves first. So, naturally my instinct is to play here, but black first the Taris, and then plays here. So it uses this forcing exchange first. Black uses the aggressive move at 1. This leads to complex fighting. The AI avoids this as white, but it's believed to be a fair fight. Let's look at the low 2-space pincer. So this idea is that white avoids pincers for the most part anyway, because it usually leads to this complex fighting. So why play the pincer if it doesn't give you a satisfactory result? We're going to look at this one, which is the low pincer. So if black presses down the stone, you can see that playing submissively never feels good, right? Same move for black, same feel for white. If white submits at 3, black takes a favorable position. So we're going to go back and try and fist fight it out. Once we hit this cross cut, if black strengthens the weak stone, then white strengthens the weak stone. If white places a low pincer, black still presses with 2, right? This idea that this knight press is the marked keystone. So in the end, we have a very complicated fight, and no set pattern has been solved for either player of this writing. Pincers continue to lead to complicated fights. Let's go look at the low three space pincer. The variations don't go further than this, but the idea is this is considered either an even or a good fight for black. But it looks very complicated. So next we will look at, did I say low or high? Order matters a little. Let's see. I think we'll just go with the high first. Okay, no, we'll go with the low. I know why, because the low and high are the same, and so they just talk about the low. So once we can go three spaces, this is a very far pincer. Much less pressure on black, if I remember. If we push down against white, white then submits. So white doesn't fight here. And there's a reason for it. I might repeat myself while I'm reading the script. But the idea is that when white pushes here, this stone's much further away from the fight. And so black definitely has a clear advantage. And so this is the move for white to play. If white plays these large pincers, then you have to submit to black here. So black then plays the same moves, right? Gets a lot of strength, white jumps, and then black comes to pincer. In this case, because white is further away, if white pushed from the same fight, so if white pushed here for the same exact fight, black would have the advantage. So white won't push at A, but instead submit at 3. This gives black the counter pincer. This is considered better for black. If we go forward, if we keep looking forward into the game, if white jumps, black makes a base. White kicks, black, step walks up. Black jumps, or sorry, white jumps, and then black jumps here with the 2 space. A and B become Miai for black. And so we look at this position, and it looks actually tough for white in the professional's view. It looks like black has some settlement here, black has some strength here, and white's the one that has to worry. And if white jumps this way, black gets to attack this side. If white jumps this way, black gets to attack this side. And so this is considered much better for black. So why pincer? This is like my third time repeating that line, but why pincer if it makes the game harder for yourself, right? If white pincer got 2 stones against the 1 and is getting bad results, it makes no sense to do it, right? Unless you like complicated fighting and you like, um, confusing people. But if they know how to handle it, they can do better, right? So even if white played the high pincer, like at C, which we looked at earlier, the same result applies, the same exact result. So let's check out the low pincers next. So they're saying when we play this, it's pretty much the same exact moves as the other diagram. If we play the low tight pincer, black still plays the key move that we've talked about many times now. If white submits, black plays the same stuff, but in this case, instead of pincering early, because this is closer, black plays for more strength. You can see that black pushes for a lot of strength and then comes back for the pincer. And if white tries to fight it, black is going to have an advantage in this fight. Black uses the same move with 2, whether the pincer was tight or loose. This long push and pincer leads to a hard fight for white. And so submitting with 3 doesn't work. So this doesn't feel that good for white in this example. So white will usually play to fight, and then it will lead to this cross cut. And if we play this way, we can Atari and then hit on top. White then secures its capture. Black tries to secure its capture. White pushes the fight. because white pincer is so close, it gets swallowed. The end result is considered okay for both players. So this stone is too close to this fight, and so it ends up getting swallowed. That's what happens at like a high level of Go. Last is the tight high pincer. So this is the very last thing it discusses. When you're looking at this, we still use the same exact move. This was the move every single time. And if the fight happens as normal, we have an older way and, of course, the new way. So the old way was to Atari. Actually, I wouldn't say this was the old way. This is just an example. But the idea is if you Atari this way and had to come back, you're in really bad shape. If black tries the same Atari with at 6, this Joseki doesn't work. Black is put in bad shape and white has the better results. AI came up with something much better, which if we go back to this fight, it's this move. We've seen this move before. This is the good fighting move. If white plays this and black plays to Atari, set up an Atari for it, we play this push again, right? We discussed that this is kind of the natural move, but we play this one first, and then we take the natural move. The aggressive move at 1 changed the way pros looked at this high tight pincer. If white continues and cuts black, black plays something like this. This is where I would find the moves hard to find, right? Like this is a hard move for me to find, personally. Also, like this move, right? If I was playing as white, to make this empty triangle feels bad. It's unnatural to me. Black does this nice large two space jump. And if white tries to cut through, black then Ataris and creates what is essentially a Ko setup. Because white doesn't have enough Ko threats, white ends up playing away. This looks complicated. Sorry about the construction in the background. This looks complicated, but if black follows along and attacks the corner, it leads to a Ko, this Ko right here. The author states white doesn't have enough Ko threats, so black usually takes the corner, and white plays away with 17. So black usually gets this corner, but white gets a very nice outside. The general consensus is, for the AI and pros, is that the pincers do more harm to the player who's pincering than good. In most cases, black comes out better or handles himself fine, and so pincers have become obsolete. This is, of course, on the highest level of Go. As amateurs, these complicated fights won't be even. I doubt it. I really doubt that one person will feel even over the other for long, right? And so studying these variations really well will help you not fear the pincers, right? You won't have to fear the pincers. In this case, if black takes the whole corner, even though white gets a nice outside, black ends up with sente also. And so this is considered better for black. So when we look at it, why would we pincer if opponent's gonna get a better result? That's generally why pincers have lost popularity. Now, of course, on our level, you can pincer as much as you want. They lead to complex fights, and it's all going to depend on who's better at reading than anything. I believe that's the end, but I'll check if there's anything else. So the idea is that instead of pincering here, which used to be considered good, is not that good anymore, and so these moves, right, kicking, Shusaku diagonal or the knight's move, these are good moves to use against a 3-4 approach, low 3-4 approach. Yeah, I think that's the end, but I do see one thing down here. I bet it's like something that got cut off. Yeah, it's something that got cut off. For some reason, OGS lags and then like splits the trees. But that's the end of it, guys. Thanks for coming through. And I hope you have a good day.